Welcome to this module of Professor Messer's free Microsoft 7680 certification training course on remote management. I'm James Messer, and in this module, we're going to look at the requirements from our 7680 exam, where we need to configure remote management. We're going to look at different ways to remotely manage a remote machine. We're going to look at how we would configure these tools so we can get them up and running and be able to manage these. We'll also look at something called PowerShell, which takes the existing shell that you're used to and takes it to an entirely new level that's really very specific to getting into the internals of how Windows works. If you've ever had to manage a number of computers in an environment, whether those computers are in the same building or across the world, then you know how important remote management can be. In this video, we're going to look at 4 different kinds of remote management technologies. The first is called remote assistance, which allows an end user to ask for help from someone else. We have remote desktop that allows administrators to, whenever they'd like, connect to a remote machine and see exactly that desktop as if they were sitting right in front of that computer. We're also going to look at ways that we could run scripts and other programs on a remote device without having to connect to it with that graphical front end. One method of doing that is something called Windows Remote Shell, which allows you to run shell commands and shell scripts from where you're sitting on a remote device. And then we'll also look at a technology called Windows PowerShell that takes that traditional shell we've been working with and really expands the capabilities quite a bit. If you've ever been working on a computer system and you run across a problem and you'd like to ask for help from someone else, then you'd like to use something like remote assistance. This is an end-user initiated feature. So this isn't a technology that you would just connect to any machine whenever you'd like. This is something the end user has to allow you access to be able to see what's going on. The end user is always in control. You can't make any changes to the end user's computer without them allowing you access to make changes to that. The default view, in fact, is for you just to be able to see the end user's workstation. They have to specifically allow you access to make changes and be able to have control of the mouse and keyboard. You can initiate this process by sending someone a file, an email, or something called Easy Connect, which would allow 2 machines to easily get connected to each other without having to go through any additional steps along the way. You would be able to start this and configure it through Control Panel. Under the System, there's a tab for Remote. This is it right here. And you can see under Remote Assistance, you can allow remote assistance connections to this computer. And under the Advanced, we'll look at some of the configurations you can have in the Advanced. The other option we'll look at in just a moment is under Remote Desktop. And there's some nice remote desktop capabilities we'll look at in this video as well. If you go to Start All Programs, under Maintenance is the Windows Remote Assistance, and that's actually how you would launch the Windows Remote Assistance functionality. Let's get on one computer, let's launch Remote Assistance, and send a file to someone else and have them help us with our problem. Let's say that we'd like to send a remote assistance request from our lab computer here. I'm going to go into my control panel. Under the System option, there is an option here for the remote settings, and under that remote settings, it brings up this remote tab. And under the remote assistance section, I want to allow remote assistance connections to this computer, which is already checked. If I click Advanced, you have the option to allow this computer to be controlled remotely, and the number of hours or minutes or days associated with a time invitation that is sent. It's a timed scenario. So you'd send somebody an invitation. They have to respond back and connect to your machine within this amount of time. If they don't connect in that amount of time, your machine's not going to allow that connection. So it's a nice security feature. If you send this to someone and a third party happens to get the invitation and the next day they'd like to try connecting to your computer, they're not going to be able to do that. You can create invitations also that can only be used from computers running Windows Vista or later, perhaps as a security precaution to make sure that nobody running other operating systems could connect to your computer. Let's initiate this connection then. I'm going to cancel out of these configurations. Let's go to our Start menu. And under All Programs, there is an option here for Maintenance. And I would like to go and start the Windows Remote Assistance. And we've got a couple of options here. We can invite someone we trust to help us, and they're going to see our screen and be able to take control of the computer. Or from here, we can help someone who has invited us. In this case, we're initiating the conversation. When this request gets to the other user, they'll choose the option to help someone else. But we'd like to invite someone at this point. I can save this invitation as a file. I can use email to send an invitation, and the computer I'm currently running doesn't have an email client. Or I can use something called Easy Connect. Normally, Easy Connect would only be available if I can connect peer-to-peer out without any type of network address translation. On my network, that's just not possible. So I'm going to send this invitation as a file using a web-based email. And I can name this invitation is fine. I'm going to put it up my desktop so we can see it. And I'm just going to click save. And it says, give your helper the invitation file and this password. So we're going to leave this up and running right now. Now let's take and send the email to the end user and have them initiate this remote connection so they can help us with our problem. We've emailed that invitation to a third party, and here we are on the third party's computer. They've received the invitation and saved it to their desktop. So I'm going to double click this. And remember, not having the invitation is enough. We have to know the password as well. So you would be in contact with that end user. Maybe you'd be on the phone. You'd have some other way to communicate with them. And this way, somebody who retrieved that invitation from that email system, maybe this is an unsecure computer, can't just click in on that machine or that invitation and connect to that machine. They click on that invitation and now they have to know the password. So we're going to reply back to that person, get them on the phone. They're going to tell us the password is LCNSY9D9-6BC9. And we're going to click OK. Now what happens is the other person's computer is going to get a message that says, would you like to allow this person now to connect to this other machine? And while we're sitting there, we're waiting for acceptance, that end user is going to be asked to either click yes or click no. We're going to click yes on that machine. And now you can see that we can see that end user's computer. So don't be confused by having one toolbar down here at the bottom and a separate one in the middle. This one in the middle is our Windows Remote Assistance screen. We'll make it a little bit smaller so you can kind of see how that works. And it shrinks the screen down so you can see it regardless of what the actual resolution happens to be. And now you can communicate to each other. There's a chat in here. You can change different settings. And now you can see exactly what the end user is doing. So we can sit here on the screen and the end user will be able to walk us through exactly what's going on their computer, and we can either help them with what they're doing or we can request control of that person's computer like this. And now the end user sees this box that has popped up on their screen that says, would you like to allow control to this person? And if they click yes, we now, when we move the mouse around, have complete control over that other computer. And now we can run different programs. We can assist them with what they're doing. Even though we're here on the Naquita lab computer, you can see this is the Atlantis lab. So we're connecting now out to that separate computer through this remote assistance configuration. Just keep in mind that we had to have the end user initiate this remote assistance for us ever to get to this point. But notice now that we're here, we can help them with anything. We can see what they see on their screen and hopefully resolve the problem that they're having. Remote desktop is a similar idea, but we don't have to have the end user's permission to connect to their computer. We're often using this to not only connect to end users' computers, but also servers, email servers, database servers, web servers, file servers, other servers you might have in your environment. The idea is that you'd have all of these machines available for you to connect to, and you would simply use this remote desktop connection application to connect to that other computer. So that machine is always there and waiting. You don't have to have an invitation. You don't have to email something around. You don't have to have the secret password that only allows you access for just that session. This is something that you integrate with the normal authentication methods you have in your environment. You can start that remote desktop connection from Start All Programs, Accessories, and Remote Desktop Connection. Now, this is only available in Windows 7 if you have the Professional, the Ultimate, and the Enterprise version. You cannot do a remote desktop connection to another computer unless it is running Windows 7 Pro, Ultimate, and Enterprise. Other computers like a home system, maybe a different version of Windows 7, you can always run the remote desktop connection. You just can't be a host for that remote desktop. If you go to Control Panel System in the Remote tab, you can change the configurations for the remote desktop, enable, disable access. And whenever you do that, it will automatically configure the appropriate Windows firewall rules, enable the right services so that you are able to connect to those remote machines. Here's an important differentiation between the Windows assistants that we looked at earlier and the remote desktop. When you're logging in as a remote desktop, you're actually logging into the computer. What you'll see on the other side is a simple logon screen because somebody else was logged into that computer, and that would be you. So this isn't a situation where you would log in and you would see the same screen as someone else. This is you as if you were sitting in front of the computer, actually logging into that machine and having full rights and access as an end user on that computer. Let's configure remote desktop capabilities from this Atlantis Lab computer. Under my control panel, we'll go to our system configuration, and I'm going to choose the remote settings option. And you'll see the second option down here is remote desktop. Either don't allow connections to this computer, allow connections from computers running any version of remote desktop, or allow connections only from computers running remote desktop with network level authentication, more secure. That sounds good to me. And I'm going to click that, and it says this computer is set up to go to sleep or hibernate when not in use. And obviously if it hibernates, the remote user can't connect to this. And it reminds you that you could go to your control panel under the power options and make it so it doesn't go to sleep. I'm now going to select what users can connect to this computer. Notice it says any members of the administrators group can connect even if they are not listed. Now, the user I'm going to connect with is a member of the administrators group, so I'm not going to worry about this. Atlantis Lab is who I'm going to log in as. That person already has access, so that's who I'm going to use to log into this computer. We don't need to configure anything else. We simply need to click OK, and now we should be able to remotely connect to this machine. Let's connect to that remote machine now. If I go to my Start menu, I'm going to go to my All Programs. Under Accessories, there is a remote desktop connection right there. And it says, what computer would you like to connect to? Well, I know that this one is the Atlantis Lab PC. And it's going to connect and says, well, these credentials will be used. We can use our Naquita Lab login. I'm going to use a different account, though, because I'm logging in locally on that machine. And I need to specify the Atlantis Lab login with the appropriate password, and I can even choose here to remember my credentials or not. Now, it says the identity of the remote computer can't be verified because it does not have a security certificate on it. I did not configure a security certificate on that other machine. It says it's not from a trusting certifying authority. That's fine, and don't even ask me again to that computer. I trust that that is the computer that I'm connecting to. If you wanted to be sure, you could always look at the certificate itself. Since I didn't go and get a third party or trusted cert, it's always going to pop that up if I don't check that box. It's going to say, welcome. I'm on my Atlantis Lab PC, and here I am. I'm now on that remote computer. We've got this little toolbar at the top, and you can see I am now on that machine running exactly the same thing I was doing before. In fact, on this full screen mode, it's as if I really am sitting right in front of that computer. The only difference is this little bar on the top, and I can even have that bar kind of go away just by unchecking that push pin. I can always put my mouse up here at the top and that appears again. And I can even change the size of that, run a window in a window. I'm running an operating system here and a remote connection to another operating system here. And then I could open up another window to another operating system and have many different machines all running on this computer. What's nice about this is that I could have a server sitting there waiting. If I need to administer the server, I simply connect to it with this remote desktop. I make the changes I need to make and I disconnect. And that's a very, very easy way to be able to administer any machine, no matter where it might be in the world. If we were to look at our Atlantis Lab machine while we were remote desktoped in, you would see this. You'd see a login screen, and it would say that you're logged on, except that's the same username logged on that I had before. Obviously, I can't see the same desktop that my remote user has. So also another difference from that remote assistance is that I'm really logged in, and while I'm logged in on that machine, nobody can see what's going on, even if somebody was in the same room as the monitor for this computer. During this course, a lot of the things that we've done have not only been at the graphical front end, but they've also been down at the command line. You'll run into situations, of course, where you may not want to be able to have a machine available through remote desktop, or maybe it's just not an option for you. There's no remote desktop capabilities for that machine, but you are able to get to the command line of that computer. So it's nice that you're learning both of these. You're learning not only how to do it from a graphical front end, but at the command line. And if you ever need to run something remotely on another machine, then you're going to really need to know how to take advantage of that command line. One thing that becomes really useful is something called Windows PowerShell. This is an enhancement to Windows that allows you to really get into the details of the Windows functionality all at the command line shell. It really extends the capabilities. And PowerShell is something that you can run on your local Windows machine with some really, really fancy PowerShell scripts, or perhaps you can run a remote PowerShell session on a remote machine. Let's first just talk about PowerShell, because PowerShell itself is something that comes with Windows 7. It's a version of PowerShell called 2.0, one of the latest that's out there. In fact, some people prefer running PowerShell instead of running the normal shell that they would always use, just because there's so many enhancements and things that you can do that go so far beyond what the traditional command prompt allows you on a machine. For instance, there's over 240 commandlets, they call them, or these tiny little commands you can run that give you access into really how Windows is working under the cover. There is what we call extensive use of pipelines. Those are those vertical bars that you could put in, where you could run a script, pipe it to another piece of the PowerShell, which pipes it to another piece of the PowerShell. So you're able to do many, many things at one time, all with one line of code. We can start PowerShell from our start menu. I'm just going to type PowerShell right here. And I've got the Windows PowerShell integrated scripting environment. I've got a Windows PowerShell modules option here. And I've just got a plain old Windows PowerShell right there. Now, this is all local on my machine. I can run scripts from this front end. Notice it looks a lot like a Windows command line here in the regular CMD shell or command shell. But notice it has PS right in front of the prompt here, which tells us this is a little bit different. You can see that it's also this blue background, which may signify there's something different about this shell. It's a little bit different than others that we've used. There are now, of course, commands that we're familiar with. If we do a dir, notice it looks a little bit differently, but we still have that directory command, and the move and the rename and the copy commands are still here, but we have access to other commands as well. If we do a git-services, I'm going to hit tab and complete that git service and hit enter. Notice it shows me everything about the services that are there. And if I do a git service question mark, I get online help about all the things I can do. I can get the service, start a service, stop a service, restart, resume, suspend, set, and new, all from the command line. These are things that just aren't available to us in a normal command shell on a Windows desktop. So this really extends our capabilities. And this is just on a local machine. Imagine what we would be able to do with some advanced PowerShell scripting if we had access to run these scripts on a remote machine. Let's see what we would have to do to get that set up and running on a remote computer. If we wanted to run a script on another computer, we need to have access to that computer that would allow us to run scripts there. A very basic functionality, which runs the simple command line scripts, not PowerShell, but the regular command line scripts, is something called Windows Remote Shell. And we get a normal shell prompt on another computer and can run whatever we'd like. Obviously, we don't need remote desktop for this. We simply use the WinRS command to connect to that machine and run whatever we would like to run. Now, this is the reason we've been going through the process of learning not just the graphical front end, but also all those command line functions as well, because we could load up some really nice scripts and tell WinRS, go out to that computer, run those scripts remotely. We might also want to run some PowerShell scripts as well. And to do that, we're going to need to enable some services on these machines called the Windows Remote Management Service. To set it up, we run a command called winrm space quick config. And that's going to start the service, make sure that people are able to use that service properly without any type of security concerns, and configure the firewall on that remote machine to be listening and see if anybody wants to run any remote scripts on that device. This Atlantis lab machine is a perfect machine to be able to set up and run for these remote shell scripts, but not any user can go to a computer and enable this capability. The idea of running remote scripts on a computer is obviously a very, very big security concern. So you want to be sure it's set up properly. You don't want to allow just any user to be able to do this. So let's start this up at a command prompt, but I'm going to do a Control-Shift and Enter so that it asks me if I want to run this in an elevated prompt, and I absolutely do. So we have the administrator option right there. Now I can run the WinRM and run the quick config to set this up. And it says it's not set up to receive requests on this machine. So the following changes have to be made. We have to set the WinRM service from delayed to delayed auto start the service, configure an account token filter policy to grant administrative rights remotely to local users. Make these changes? Yes, I do. And now it's going to say it has been updated to receive requests. It has made the changes that needed to be made. I could create a WinRM listener on http:// to accept WS management requests to any IP on this machine. And it says it's going to enable the WinRM firewall exception to make these changes. Why, yes, I do. And there it is. It's now got a listener running and it's got a firewall exception. It's now ready to receive the scripts running and have them run on this computer. Let's now try running a remote shell on that Atlantis Lab PC. I am here on the Naquita Lab computer, and I'm just going to start up a command prompt with the CMD command, and I'm going to run a command called the Windows Remote Shell command, WinRS. This will allow me to run things that I would normally run right here in this command shell, except they're going to run on that Atlantis Lab computer. Now I need to specify that remote host name, which in this case, it's listening via HTTP, and it's called the Atlantis Lab PC. And I also need to specify the port number that this is listening on. By default, that remote shell service is going to be listening on port number 5985. Now I need to specify the username, which is local on this computer. So this is the Atlantis Lab-PC /Atlantis Lab. That's the name of the user. And I need to now, what I'd like to do, I'd like to say dir /. We'll get a directory of just the root of that C drive, and we'll hit enter. It says, please enter the password on this computer and this username to connect to that particular machine. I'll type in the password, and I immediately get back this listing of all of the files that were on that remote computer. So just by running that WinRS command, we're able now to run anything at that remote script command and have it give us information about what was running on that computer. So I can run any script and any command using that, and it all runs remotely on that separate machine. We can do similar remote scripts now using PowerShell. PowerShell is very powerful, and now that we've enabled that remote management capability, we should be able to take advantage of that. I'm going to run just a standard Windows PowerShell right here at the prompt, and let's run a command that will allow us to pull information from a remote machine. I'm going to run a command, a Windows PowerShell command called get-wmi object, and the object that I'm going to ask for is a specific class that is in the Win32_service. So this is a list of the services running on this remote device. I need to specify the computer name that will be this script will actually run on, and it will run on the Atlantis Lab PC. And then I need to also tell the Windows PowerShell the credential I'd like to use, and the credential, the login, is Atlantis-Lab. And it's going to pop up a box and say, give me your password and we'll run the script for you. And I'll type that in, and it's going to fly by tons of information about the services running on that computer. So just by using PowerShell and having it specify that I want to run those on a remote computer and have that remote computer able to receive those remote management commands, I've now got a lot of flexibility available. I can run regular Windows shell scripts, or I can run PowerShell scripts and really take advantage of that remote management functionality. Let's review some of the things that we've learned in this video. Our first question is, what methods can be used to invite a user to a remote assistant session? If you remember, our end user had to send the request to the person who would be helping, and they can send that through a file, an email, or through something called Easy Connect. Our next question is, what script configures remote management on a computer? If you recall, there was something we needed to run first before we were able to run remote scripts on a machine, and that was WinRM space quick config. And the last question, which Windows 7 editions support incoming remote desktop sessions? Not all editions do. You have to at least be running Windows 7 Professional, Windows 7 Ultimate, or Windows 7 Enterprise to be able to have that remote desktop incoming session work on that machine. Well, that covers our requirements for this video. We've gone through a lot of different kinds of remote management through our remote assistants, our remote desktop, and of course, now we're able to run scripts on a remote computer. If you'd like to watch any of our absolutely free Microsoft 7680 videos, you'd like to leave a message on our message boards or send me an email, you can visit our website at professormesser.com.